What? How old were you during this era?
In 1969, I was 14 years old. Your age.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living on 51st and Fairfield, 5127 South Fairfield in Gage Park neighborhood.
Okay. What were you doing at the time?
I was a freshman at Brother Rice High School. I was a student.
Okay. What do you remember about Martin Luther King?
The only thing I remember, he was a spokesperson for the civil rights movement for the black people. I really didn't pay too much attention to what was going on because I was too busy preoccupied with other things. It didn't, whatever he was doing really never registered with me, and I never really paid attention to it, other than I knew he was a spokesperson for the black movement.
What did you think about him?
I really had no opinion. Because, like I say, they didn't teach about him in school at that time because he was still living, or no, he had just got assassinated. So I mean, his history wasn't written yet. So I didn't really know too much about the guy, other than, like I say, he was a spokesman for the civil rights movement.
Okay. What do you think of the riots after his death?
Well, I think it was very unfortunate because blacks rioted in their own neighborhoods, and they burned down all the businesses that they were patronizing. So all their food marts and auto dealerships and everywhere else on the west side of Chicago, they burned it down. I think it was very unfortunate.
Did you see or join any of the riots?
No.
Did you or your family admire Martin Luther King?
Well, like I say, my family never really talked about him. We just, whatever was on television, that was about it, and we never really discussed Martin Luther King.
What was your opinion on the civil rights movement?
Well, I think it was long overdue. I mean, it was going to happen sooner or later. You know, we fought a civil war in 1860 to 1865 for the slavery movement.
Yeah.
And 1965 was the Civil Rights Act that President Johnson signed. So, I mean, that's 100 years later, and the blacks were still not too much better than they were in the 1800s. So, I mean, it was something that was long overdue.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember anything about the Jim Crow laws?
No, I mean, the only thing I remember, the blacks, they couldn't eat in white restaurants, they couldn't drink out of white water fountains, couldn't go into white bathrooms. But up here in Chicago, I mean, I didn't have any effect on me. I mean, I never really experienced anything like that, not at all.
Did you like John F. Kennedy?
From what I remember, yes. I mean, my parents, I know that they really admire him. He was the first Catholic president we had, and I'm a Catholic. So, everyone liked Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
If you could get elected the first Catholic president in our history, he had to do something right,
Where were you, and where were you when John F. Kennedy was shot?
I was sitting in 3rd grade at Five Holy Martyrs on 43rd and Sacramento in Chicago, in Brighton Park neighborhood. I was in grammar school, and I remember the announcement came over the PA system that John Kennedy was assassinated, and like I say, I was in 3rd grade. I really didn't. I knew what had happened. I knew he got killed, but yeah. And then I remember going home that day, and my mother was crying, and she mentioned that he was assassinated, and that was it.
Were you afraid of communism? Why or why not?
No, I was never afraid of communism. I mean, I knew in the 50s they had those drills for in case there was an attack, you got underneath the desk. We never did that when I was in grammar school, so it didn't have any phase on me at all.
How did you feel about the USSR?
I really didn't know too much about it, other than, the Soviet Union was a communist, nation, I mean, that's about all I knew. I mean, it really didn't have no effect on me. I was too young, you know.
Yeah.
I was just a kid. So I mean, I was too busy into baseball and watching sports and being outside, and I really wasn't watching the news or reading the papers. So to me, it really never affected me.
What are your thoughts on the nuclear arms race?
Well, you got to remember, the United States is the only superpower to ever use nuclear weapons, and we did it twice, right? We did it in Nagasaki and Hiroshima,
Yeah.
you know, in Japan. So, I mean, if we ever have to use them again, or will we? I doubt it very much if anyone will. I think everyone uses that now as just as a deterrent to each other. You know, I've got this many nuclear weapons, and how many do you have? And
Yeah.
but no, do I think that? I don't think it's ever going to come to nuclear war again.
Mhm. Yeah. What did you think about the Berlin Wall?
Well, yeah, the only thing I remember the Berlin Wall, that it separated Germany into East and West. You know, the East was communist, backed by Russia, and the West was backed by us. It was a democracy.
Yeah. What do you remember about the Red Scare?
You know, the only thing I remember about the Red Scare is what happened in the 50s. It had no effect on me when I was a kid growing up, but I remember in the 50s they had the Red Scare where they thought communism was going to come here and infiltrate our society, infiltrate our politics and everything like that, and it never happened.
Did you see propaganda? If so, what was it?
I never saw any type of propaganda, not at all.
Did you know anyone in the Vietnam War? Who were they?
Oh, I knew my good friend that I hung out with. He went to Kelly High School. He dropped out after his junior year. He joined the Army, and they sent him to Vietnam. And I remember writing letters with him. He was in Pleiku. He was in the Central Highlands of Vietnam. He never saw any action, but that's where he was stationed. And fortunately, he came back home, and it was fine.
What are your thoughts on the Vietnam War?
Was probably either the first or second biggest mistake the United States ever did. You know, the Civil War would be the first mistake that this country entered, and the second was this Vietnam War, because it was so unnecessary. I mean, we had no type of strategy to win the war. 58,000 kids got killed in it. I mean, it was just a tragedy that never should have happened. And now in history, now you could read about it. Now you could learn about it. Now you could see what went on. Now you see how bad that the United States managed this war. And this is our country, our democracy. And they messed this thing up big time. And they should be ashamed of themselves, you know, from all them presidents that started it, from Eisenhower to Kennedy to LBJ to Nixon. I mean, those people should be ashamed of themselves.
Were you in the military?
No, I was always in school. Even though when you were 18 years old, when I was 18, I had registered for the draft, because at that time there was still a draft. I went down on 39th by Western Avenue. I signed up for the draft. I got a draft card, but by the time they stopped the draft in 1971, and I was a junior in high school at the time, so that didn't affect me at all.
Were you involved or did you see any protests? What was it like?
In 1968, I went downtown Chicago for the protest at Grant Park in front of the Conrad Hilton. My sister, myself, and her boyfriend. And I witnessed this firsthand with the National Guard out front of the Conrad Hilton. And I saw all the hippie protesters. I saw the coppers out there. I mean, it was pretty cool being a 14-year-old kid and witnessing this. Yeah, but I saw it firsthand.
What was your first job and did you like it?
My first job, I was a paper boy for the Chicago American. It was the afternoon paper in Chicago. After school, I'd go to on 54th and Sacramento, and I'd get my papers, and my route was on Campbell, 51st, 54th and Campbell, and I would deliver the papers after school. And yeah, it wasn't a bad job.
Okay. What kind of music did you like?
I listened to rock and roll, top 40. That was the music of the time. And that's what I listened to, WLS, WCFL, and everything in the top 40. That's what I listened to. And I still listen to this day.
Okay. What was your favorite song?
Well, I had a lot of favorite songs, but I think "L.A. Goodbye" by the Ides of March was, probably one of the better ones that I liked. But there was a ton of good songs that I liked, and to pick out one, it's kind of hard. But "L.A. Goodbye" by the Ides of March would be one of them.
Did you have an idol or hero? Who was it? Why and why?
My idol at the time was Mickey Mantle, outfielder for the New York Yankees. I was a baseball player in grammar school, in high school, and college. And he was one of the best ball players ever in the history of baseball. And he was a lefty like I was. He threw righty like I did. And I was a Yankee fan. And I still am a Yankee fan.
What did you do for fun?
We just hung out on the corner. We had a little club in the back of my buddy's. He had a garage. We had a club set up with television, radio, couch, strobe lights. And we just hung out. We play sports together. We play fast pitching. We play basketball together. And just hang out.
What trends did you follow?
Just whatever the trends of the day were, and that was, in the 60s, it was a hippie thing. So people started growing their hair long, wearing bell bottoms. I had the Chuck Taylor Converse high top gym shoes. That was the big thing at the time.
What was different from schools then to schools now?
Well, the main thing is the discipline. When I was in grammar school and high school, the nuns beat you up, In high school, I remember getting slapped in the face. I got beat with a gym shoe,
Yeah.
And to me, that's everyone got beat when they were in grammar school and high. That was the way they discipline you. Nowadays they can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
People would be arrested and everything else, but at the time when I was going to school, that's just the way it was,
What was the biggest change from that era till now?
Well, like I say, the biggest change is the discipline. In schools, it was the discipline. The biggest change from that era to now, society-wise, is there is a lot more crime nowadays. When I was growing up, I didn't worry about gangs. I didn't worry about drive-by shootings. I didn't worry about getting beat up by anybody. I would walk home from 52nd in Sacramento to my house on 51st and Fairfield at 2 o'clock in the morning. I never worried about anything. I walked right down the street. It was plus it was a lot simpler time. There were no cell phones, there were no computers, there were no video games. There was nothing to keep you in the house. Everybody went outside and did whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah. If you could change anything from growing up in this era, what would it be?
Oh, what would I change? Probably not too much. Growing up, you mean from my era? No, there was really nothing. It was a much simpler time. People had jobs. Everybody seemed to be happy. They were much more family orientated.
Yeah.
Everything was fine. All my friends had, 2-parent families, and it just seemed to be a nice, happy time.
What would you say your favorite memory from this time was?
Just growing up and not being bothered with any kind of hassles like nowadays. Pressures that the kids are put into. I never got bullied or anything like that. Nowadays kids are getting bullied. That really never. I'm sure it occurred when I was growing up, but I was never part of anything like that. So.
Well, this wraps up our interview, and by the way, this is my neighbor Dave.